Very, very warm welcome. It's the sixth in our series of Ask Hala webinars, and today we're going to be looking at selecting and designing materials. I suppose just to frame that, one of the things that we tend perhaps to focus on insufficiently, now that we're all moved confidently to the remote delivery setting, is about evaluating the content that we make available for learners to engage with, and that where we would normally perhaps in a face-to-face environment be thinking really carefully about whether this is the right level or if it's going to be of interest, is it from a learner perspective, all of those sorts of things. But sometimes in the remote delivery setting, we're perhaps not as assiduous as we might otherwise be in the face-to-face environment. So that's the kind of the selecting. And also the other part of this that Hala is going to be talking about is the design as well, that we're probably, really good at using chalk and permanent board markers in a face-to-face environment, and that we're good at creating worksheets, kind of thing, printed versions of it. But when it comes to designing materials for the remote delivery setting, it's another challenge for us, and we're not necessarily as confident with that kind of environment as we are with the face-to-face environment. So, selecting and designing materials. We're joined not just by Hala, of course, but my two dear colleagues, Nora from Bahrain and Tema from Cairo, who will be helping us out, moderating and providing additional comments from time to time. One last thing, it is an interactive session, so please use the Q&A box. We'll be pausing from time to time to gather up the questions and put them to Hala. So again, don't be shy. Please come forward with your comments. This is a webinar for you, so we want to know what you think. We want to know what your questions are, etc. Okay. Great, thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to hand over to Hala and the cockerel for webinar number 6, selecting and designing materials for the remote delivery context.
Thank you very much, John, and good afternoon or good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to meet you again for our number 6 webinar in a series. And I just want to take you for a flashback how we started and how it's going on now. We started with the first webinar was around synchronous platforms for remote teaching. Then we focused on the social media. Then we moved to the asynchronous platforms and EdMod was the example. Then we talked about the blended learning approach. Then in webinar number 5, we talked about how to motivate learners in remote teaching and learning. And today is our number 6, and we are going to talk about selecting, evaluating, developing, adapting, and designing materials, which, as you can see, a very interesting but also important teaching skill. So please, if you haven't done the poll, please check out the chat box and let us know where you're joining us from. And in today's webinar, we are hoping to cover these learning outcomes or objectives. We're going to look at 2 key frameworks that direct our thinking towards evaluating, selecting, developing materials for remote teaching. And these 2 key frameworks is one developed by the British Council and one is developed by Cambridge English. We're going also to look at some example criteria for selecting online materials, and we have a sample checklist for you today. I know you like checklists because I do. We're going to give you our top tips today on how to create or digitize existing content for remote teaching. And we'll wrap up with sharing with you some resources for your further reading if you like. So let's start off by a quote from a teacher in Bloomingburg, New York, the United States. This is how she feels when she prepares content for her remote lessons. I feel I am attempting to drive on a road that I am simultaneously paving while also following a paper map. So she's multitasking. She's doing 3 things at the same time. I think you can relate by reading this quote and looking at the picture. How do you feel when you prepare your content for your remote teaching? Do you enjoy it? Tell us in the chat box. Take like 30 seconds and respond with a word or two. How do you feel? Do you enjoy preparing content for your remote lessons? How much do you enjoy it, if you enjoy it at all? Let's see if John can pass on to me some responses.
I think people are still joining us, still telling us where they're from. Latest from Bushra. So, answers to Hala's question, please, in the Q&A box.
I personally enjoy preparing content for my sessions, for my lessons when I used to teach. However, it was also challenging and time consuming. I mean preparing for a 2-hour lesson could take me in the old days, could take me like 3-4 hours preparation and finding useful resources, relevant content and stuff like that. So how about you? I enjoy it, but also I'm also worried about my time management when I prepare content.
We've got one comment so far, Hala, which is quite neutral, which is I don't mind it.
You don't mind it because it's a part of your job, I think. I mean, a teacher should prepare content for remote lessons. Okay, let's collect your responses and your feelings as we go. This is a kind of survey we conducted on the 1st of June, 4 or 5 months ago, when we surveyed 200 members of our British Council Teacher Community Facebook group, and our question to them was, where do you find content for your online lessons? And the top 3 responses, as you can see from the screen, were either they use online materials, like they use existing online materials available on the internet, or they create their own content, or they use their course book, like the published materials they have in hand. So let's explore today this skill, the skill of selecting, evaluating, adapting, and developing materials for remote teaching in terms of these 3 aspects: finding existing or available materials online, developing your own content, and using the coursebook. I'd like to introduce you today to the CPD framework for teachers. We have different frameworks for teachers, one for teachers and one for teacher educators. And I'd like to introduce you to the framework developed by the British Council. Let us know if you can't see or hear the video.
For teachers to engage in successful CPD, they need support to help identify their strengths and the areas they need to develop. The British Council CPD framework for teachers is based on our global knowledge of teaching and is designed to be flexible enough to work across subjects and contexts. It provides teachers, teacher educators, and school leaders with a common language so they can discuss development needs and set development pathways based on each individual. The framework is built around 12 professional practices. These represent key areas in which teachers apply professional knowledge and utilise specific skills. Each one is interlinked, representing a combination of practical and conceptual understanding, skills and knowledge. Through our self-assessment and classroom observation tools, the framework helps teachers map their skills against the professional practices according to 4 stages, from simple awareness of a practice to an understanding of it, engagement with it, and integration of it into their classes. With this knowledge, teachers, schools, and ministries of education can identify the right resources. British Council development materials are mapped to the framework, and we're working with a growing number of education institutions to map their own materials too. All the parameters can be tailored to a specific country's standards. It's not an inspection device. It's a tool to support inclusive, teacher-led self-development with peer support wherever it's needed.
So the short animated video you've seen now is actually our approach, our reference, which inspires and informs our planning and decisions when it comes to teacher continuous professional development. Let's have a deep dive on one specific skill or one specific professional practice from the 12 you've seen now. It's this
while
one.
While that's coming up, Hala, and maybe a good introduction, had some points raised in answer to your initial question, just to steer you.
Okay.
So, selecting and designing materials, stressful and hectic, can be fun,
Okay.
can be enjoyable.
Oh, I agree on all of that. All of it. Stressful, hectic, fun, enjoyable. Let's go through the webinar together and explore why this specific professional practice can entail all of these different feelings and different experiences. So the wheel you can see on the screen now contains 12 professional practices, and this is what was explained in the animated video. But we are going to focus today on one specific practice, which is managing resources. And a fun fact about the framework you see on the screen now is that John Shackleton is the person who developed it and who invented the 4 stages of development: the awareness, understanding, engagement, integration. I've been using the framework for 5 years or something, and I didn't know that John invented it till John came to Egypt early this year. It took John to come to Egypt for me to know that he invented the whole thing. So managing resources is going to be broken down today into 4 key stages or stations. First is evaluating and selecting. So in order for you to select the relevant materials for your remote teaching, you start by evaluating them first. You look at them with a critical eye, then you make your selection. Then you face the issue of how to manage the resources you've been collecting for days and months, how to store them, how to curate and collate them. Then now you want to put them in action. You want to use them in your remote lessons. So are you going to use them as is? Are you going to adapt them? Are you going to develop, or are you going to design something for you on your own, something from scratch? And while you're in action, while you're teaching, how are you going to use them so that you achieve the intended learning outcomes you had in mind at the beginning? So evaluating, selecting, collating and curating, adapting, developing, designing, and using. Now, what do the 2 key frameworks tell us when it comes to evaluating and selecting the digital materials or resources? There are so many resources out there, thanks to the internet and thanks to the revolution in technology and sharing knowledge and information, yes. But what do we need to do? Simply, there is a thumb rule here. The best digital resource is the one that helps you support your learners in reaching an intended learning outcome. So you want them to use the present perfect to talk about personal experiences, for example. So this is your learning outcome. Make sure you select the digital resources that help you and your learners to reach to this intended learning outcome. In order to do that, while you're evaluating the available resources, you evaluate the quality, the ease of use, the effectiveness for teaching and learning, and also you keep an eye on the potential problems. You also make sure that those resources meet your needs as well as the needs of your learners. And don't forget that it's important for you to articulate, to be able to identify the rationale and the reasons behind why you selected these resources. Either to articulate this for yourself, you have a reason, or to articulate it for your colleagues and your learners, perhaps to the parents too. So while selecting the digital resources, while you're doing your online shopping for free, make sure you have a decent range of available sources. It's not just, don't stick to one source because you think it's credible and trustworthy, that's fine. But also make sure you look at other sources. Make sure when you're doing your online shopping for digital materials, you have a range of media. Pick something digital, some text, some print, some audiovisual content, but all should be relevant to your needs, learners' needs, and your context. Make sure that you bring a range of tools to your remote teaching experience just to facilitate collaboration or collaborative production. Make sure your learners are productive. They have something to produce through collaboration with themselves and with you. And make sure you have a checklist with criteria for selecting the materials. And this takes us actually to this sample checklist or examples of criteria. So I'm looking at different sources now. I have in mind some potential materials that I think would be good for my learners, but I need to prioritize my selection, which to start first, which I'm going to use tomorrow in my lesson. These are the criteria you need to ask yourself these questions while selecting or prioritizing your materials. In terms of the content, is it appropriate to the age group I'm teaching? Another important point here, is it culturally acceptable, appropriate? Have I gone through the content? Have I checked all the links? Do I expect any controversies when I expose my learners to this content? Does it meet their interest? Does it resonate with their needs? Is it multi-channeled? Do I have audio, video, text, print, articles? Is it safe? Does it, I mean, if when they share their data, is the data protected? Is there any possibility for hacking their accounts or Zoom bombing them or exposing them to indecent content? Now, when it comes to the activities you're going to bring to your remote lessons, do these activities have a varied pattern of interaction? Does it allow the students to interact with each other, and does it allow them to interact with you? Is there a balance between accuracy and fluency? The old classic argument, let's focus on accuracy. No, let's focus on fluency. Let's focus on both. Are the activities in this resource presented in a logical sequence? Does it follow a logical sequence? Is there a theory in sequence them? Does it start with the known, then it gradually goes to the unknown? Does it start with the easy, then it goes gradually to the difficult? Does it build first on the students' existing knowledge, then it takes them to new areas of learning? Are there clear instructions to support the students with the tasks? Are the symbols, the icons used there easy to understand and popular? Is there a possibility for recycling language? Is there a space for mixed abilities, mixed levels of language? When it comes to the language, make sure you revise the language very well. Is it meaningful, accurate, up to date? Think about the level of support given to you. Do you find some references and explanations for key language points? There are answer keys. There are suggestions for extended tasks or additional activities in case students finish early. Now think about the layout and the interface. Is the design attractive? Is the content clear when it's set out? Is there enough space for learners to read the materials easily? Is there enough space for them to write their answers? I mean, if you're using electronic worksheets or something, is it easy for them to navigate, to click on the buttons and use the navigation arrows? Now think about the learning strategies and the learner autonomy. Are there any opportunities for learners to assess their own work, to evaluate themselves, evaluate each other? Does the application or the tool give the learners feedback? Can they find the answers and can they know how they did in the assignment? Is there a possibility to give them some study tips? It's not only about the content and the information, but also some advice on how they study and manage their learning. Accessibility, which is very important when it comes to digital resources or online resources. Can they use, now you need to check if they can use the materials through a range of devices, the smartphones, the tablets, the computers, the laptops. Are they familiar, do the materials come in a familiar file formats so they don't have to convert them? Are they stored in a place which is accessible to everybody? Is it easy to use for the disabled or impaired people? Is there any cost involved when they use this tool or this resource? What is the required equipment exactly? A specific browser, a specific internet speed? And finally, the standards compliance. Make sure you comply with your institutional standards. Are there any requirements in terms of the page layout, the word size, the number of lines in the PowerPoint slide, how the format of referencing a book or something? Do you have any questions? Do you want to interrupt me, John?
I always feel shy about interrupting you, Hala, of course. Thank you. Yeah, there are some comments, I think, and that what you were saying earlier about the focus of the lesson, for example, which you gave about, is it on fluency or is it on accuracy or something in between the two? There was a question around recommending resources that help to develop speaking skills, and I think it's an important one, and that it's something that we can perhaps have a more of a focus on, because one of the things I think that we're finding out in the remote delivery of English compared to the remote delivery of maths, for example, is that there are specific things about learning a language remotely that need special attention and special support, and one of those things is speaking, because I suppose the maths teacher is not really interested in developing the speaking skills of their students, whereas with learning a language, that is the case. We do want our learners to be better communicators in spoken form, don't we? So that presents a special challenge, I think, when it comes to choosing materials, choosing resources. And the other question, I think, and you touched on it as well when you were talking about activities, is that, you know, the relationship between the selection prior to the lesson of the materials and how they're actually going to work in the lesson when you get onto it, which you covered, you know, really nicely. So two things there, something about speaking skills in particular, which resources really help that. And the other thing is, in your planning process, when you're selecting materials, how do you project yourself forward into the classroom and think, yeah, okay, I think this is going to work, or I don't think this is going to work, I'm going to choose something else.
Yeah, I just want to direct whoever asked the question about speaking and how to maximize speaking in remote lessons Two resources that I'd recommend today. One is a remote teaching tip or a guidance document on the Teaching English website, and it's specifically on how to maximize speaking and encourage learners to speak in remote lessons. Two, check out the self-study booklet on the Teaching English website. There is a whole booklet for the teachers to study around the speaking and the maximizing interaction. So check out these two resources and you'll find a good range of ideas there. Now, moving on to another area of the professional practice today is collating and curating. There is an issue. It's overlooked really because we get busy looking for materials, selecting them, compiling them, but there is an issue around the quantity and how to manage this enormous amount of digital materials on our laptops or on our internal drives. It could be overwhelming, as one of our colleagues mentioned today, earlier in the webinar. So we need to use technology as a tool, as a user-friendly tool to help us store and access digital learning resources. And while we're storing and organizing the materials, we need to put that in a way that creates pathways, not only through today's lesson, but throughout the whole learning unit or the whole course you're teaching. So while you're organizing or storing the materials you've been collecting for months, make sure that the learner goes through a journey. There is a pathway. Once they finish a unit, they find something to tell them to go to the next, where to go next and why they need to go to that next step. That would help save your time, of course. And by doing this, you are creating differentiated learning by providing pathways, taking them through different levels, and also by providing them with extended activities. So one thing we need to work on is to learn more about the digital tools that help us manage our own learning resources. I'd like to recommend today to you a fantastic curating tool. It's called Wakelet. I'm sure many of you have already heard of it. It's a curating and collating tool. So once you sign up for a free account, you click on the plus symbol, then you start creating what they call a collection. You give the collection a title, let's say resources to maximize speaking, for example. Then you can add PDF files, you can add links to YouTube videos, you can add your own voice messages with some tips, you can add a text, you can add a picture for an activity from the course book. And you, after you made your collection, you can share that with your students. So they have collections curated as groups of resources and with headings. It's a fantastic tool. Please check it out today. Now, moving on to another area in the ladder, one more stage in the ladder, which is developing or adapting or even designing digital materials. Two things here. It's either you use the technological tools to transform content you already have in hand, or create attractive, engaging materials of your own. So two directions. While doing this, make sure you use a range of tools with these specifications. The tool fits with the learner's needs and the syllabus. The tool is professional, attractive, and accessible. While developing or designing your own material, please conform to the copyright regulations. Make sure you are on top of that. Make sure your content is culturally appropriate. We've covered that. Now, let's be more specific about the content we're creating here. How to create our audio-visual content. You know, it's important to include audio-visual content to keep your students motivated and engaged. There are some things we need to bear in mind while developing or adapting our audio-visual content. There are three types of audio of content here. It's either audio, video, and the video here, by the way, can have an audio or without an audio. It can be with an audio or without an audio, and you can have a video without an audio for some pedagogic use. I mean, you can ask them to predict what the video is about, or they can guess what the speakers are talking about in the video. And the third type here is the screencasting. It's when you record the screen. To be clearer on that, we can use screencasting videos to explain sections of the lesson or textbook. It's when you have a video explaining what happens on the screen, moving the arrows around, pointing to screenshots, with an audio at the background or without. It's up to you. While creating your audiovisual content, there are some do's and some don'ts. The do's. Have a script. I am a big fan of scripts. I like to have a script if I'm recording a video, if I'm giving a short presentation. It could be a script or bullet points. If you have a smooth text, please make sure the text doesn't have unnecessary repetitions, because it's a video. It has to be short and simple. Ensure that the camera is steady. Make sure the camera stands steadily somewhere. Make sure that the lighting is good and as bright as possible. And I recommend using the natural light. So record your video in the daytime, early morning or something, or in the afternoon under the natural light. Look straight to the camera while speaking to make sure to enable you keep an eye contact as if you're in the face-to-face class. Keep the tone informal and friendly and personal, because this is how you keep your learners engaged. This is how you get them to listen to you. If you're going to share a video with the learners, just make sure you give them something to do as a result of the listening or the watching. Make the task meaningful and purposeful for them. You watch or you listen to that because they want you to do X, Y, Z. And after they finish the video or the listening exercise, make sure you give them a follow-up task just for you to make sure that learning has taken place. What about the don'ts? We agreed to read a script because we don't want to produce in the video or a video with hesitations and pauses, because this can distract the learners. Don't speak too fast. Speaking too fast is not fluency. Speaking too fast is not cool. Speaking too fast is just makes the listeners struggle understanding what you're saying. Don't hold the camera, because holding it will cause the shaky videos, and that could also be distracting. And don't have the light behind you. It will make your face look dark in the video. Face the light, not putting it behind you. Now, what about our recommended list of tools for creating your content? You can use the voice recorder, and it exists in any mobile phone. Any mobile phone, any smartphone has got a built-in voice recorder. Google screencasting tool, which is called the Screencastify, and this is one of the big things I learned during this year, 2020, especially after the pandemic hit the world. I learned how to produce instructional videos through recording the screens by this add-on. It's called the Screencastify. It's wonderful. Please try it out. YouTube. There is the studio in YouTube, which enables you to create videos in a professional format, but also you can add captions or subtitles to your video. OneNote, it's a collaborative space where more than learners come together and they write notes to each other. They can even leave voice messages to each other on the same document in the same space. And my second recommended tool for you today is a website called Explain Everything. It has a very interesting set of templates which can help you produce an instructional video in a professional way. Please check it out with Screencastify from Google. These are my two top tools today.
It's a really good a good time to feed in a couple of things that have come out in the question and answer box. You've just answered one of them, which was could you give us some examples of screencasts? Well, the Screencastify is a place, I'm sure, where you can find lots of different examples of that. And the other point, I think, which comes up on a regular basis during our Ask Hala webinar series, is around workload, around teacher workload. So what you're saying about storage, using Wakelet, for example, of use not just for the lesson, but you think, oh, okay, that's good, I can use that in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to come on to that point later in the program. It's so important, and it cuts down the stress and the hectic nature of always trying to look for something new for your classes, when actually you've already got some and you've stored them in a way that makes them readily accessible. So really good point that I think resonates with some of the comments that we've had throughout this series.
Absolutely, I'm glad these 2 points specifically came up today. Yes, I totally agree. Now moving to the final step in the ladder, which is using, now putting the materials that we've selected, we've developed into action. What do we need to bear in mind while using the materials? Using not just the random use, it's using as a result of the whole process, or the result of evaluating, selecting, adapting, and developing. Make sure you have the right focus of the lesson. What do I need to focus on today? Is it a grammar point? Is it a set of vocabulary? Is it a skill on its own? And make sure you strike the right balance of activities. And you have a space for recycling, reviewing, making revisions, and assessment. It's something that we've been repeating, not because it comes up naturally, but because it's very important. Using the appropriate pedagogical strategies. We're talking about technology, but pedagogy still comes before technology. Make sure you employ the appropriate pedagogical strategy. Don't get tempted by technology. This is really important. I can't stress it enough. It's reflecting on your approach. So after I evaluated the materials, I selected, I curated and stored, I developed and adapted, I used them. Now I need to sit back and think about the whole approach, the whole process. How was it good enough? Do I need to change something? Have I met the learner outcomes? Now, what about using the existing or the published materials, but using them for our remote lessons? Make sure you find the digital version of the course book, for example, a PDF version, and it's authorized. It's not like downloaded illegally from the internet. Or take pictures of the course book you have at home and show the learners on a screen what pages they need to look at, what activities they should focus on. You can even go to the YouTube and find topics, videos related to the course book topics you're teaching, and share the links with the students. And remember, if you get them to watch a video, make sure you give them a task before they watch, a task while they watch, and a task after they watch. I'll give you an example now of a warmer or a lead-in activity. You can take a picture from the course book, then cover the picture with sticky notes. There are electronic sticky notes, by the way, on the internet, and there is one produced by Google. Just to type in the search bar electronic sticky notes or online sticky notes, and put that on the screen. Share your screen and ask your students questions, yes, no question. If they answer with yes, and if they answer a question correctly, you reveal one sticky note, you reveal one part of the picture, then you gradually reveal the picture by removing one sticky note every time the answer is yes. So it's a way of engaging them and bringing them, leading them into the lesson in a fun way. You can even take a picture of an activity, a text from the course book, then use a marker tool. Again, you'll find that online. Just to type in online marker tool to cover some of the words, and this way you can create a close exercise with gaps. Then they need to guess the missing words. Another interesting tool that I came across last week is the talk and comment. It's an add-on from Google. You can have a Google document. We all know that we can leave comments in boxes, like in text for each other. Now with the talk and comment add-on, this is a button you can add on the top bar of your screen, where you can leave a comment in voice. You can leave a comment as a voice message, not as only a text. It's cool. Try it out. Now, while we're doing all of this, accessibility and inclusion is very important and very essential, because we need to follow the principle of do no harm. It's not because we're moving things online, or not because we're delivering our lessons remotely, that some people can be left behind because they don't have accessibility to the internet, or they don't have accessibility to a laptop, or they can't simply deal with this level of technology. So make sure that delivering your lessons remotely doesn't leave a student behind. And there are again a list of do's and don'ts here. Use the alt text to pictures on Microsoft documents, such as the PowerPoint and the Word, and the alt text thing will provide you with captions or descriptions to the pictures. So people who can't see the images because they are visually impaired or something, they can read through the screen readers. They can read the caption or the description. If you're using hashtags, capitalize the hashtags because you know hashtags do not have spaces. So use hashtag change makers with capital C and M rather than small letters. In the contrast, adjust your screen contrast to 70% and consider the minimum font size as 12 point, not lower or less than 12 point. Use clear formatted headings and lists to help the students navigate your document. Don't use like chunks and chunks of text. Use headings and lists and subheadings. No problem with that. What about the don'ts? Don't use text boxes because screen readers can't read these. So people who are visually impaired and they depend on screen readers, they will struggle reading the text boxes. Don't use images of a text. Don't take screenshots of a text and use it as an image, because again, screen readers wouldn't read that. Also, Google Translate wouldn't translate a picture. When you want to emphasize a text, don't depend only on different colors. Use other things because not everybody can pick the colors up. Some people can't see the colors and they can't differentiate between the colors. If possible, always use audio and text messages in combination. Anything before we head to the final slide, John?
Well, we're having a very interesting conversation about what does recycling the language mean, but I think we've kind of dealt with that one now. I think there are two things maybe that come out. I think one question around there's lots of choice, lots of variety. Many different apps that can be confusing for learners. That's one of the comments that came out, and I think it's possibly our fundamental question in relation to this webinar series about making it as easy as possible for teachers and for learners to get into some kind of rhythm about remote delivery, to get some real kind of focus on where to go to for good materials, how to take what they know already and turn them into something that's going to be effective in the remote delivery environment. What we're trying to do is really to help guide teachers towards good practice. And I think from all of that, the question that's not been asked, but it's a question that I've been love to ask you, maybe you can come to it at the end, is that, is it, in your opinion, in your experience, the preparation for a face-to-face class in terms of finding resources compared to preparation for an online class, do you think it's more difficult? Do you think it's easier? Do you enjoy doing it more? Is it more stressful? Some of those, so some kind of, from your experience, some kind of comparison would be really, really interesting. We'd love to know what you think about that.
That's interesting that this question is asked now, and specifically now, because I'd like to say two things here. First, if I'm introducing you today to 4, 5, 6 tools, it doesn't mean you need to use the 6 tools all together in one lesson in 1 hour. It's your bank of tools that you're going to think about for the whole course while you're planning for the entire term, for example. Maybe every week you can try out one tool, but keep them on your list and keep trying them out till you find the best thing for yourself, for your context and your learners. This is one thing. So don't focus on everything at once. My advice today wasn't to use all of the tools together, but just to think about them and spread them across the course of learning you're doing. That's one thing. The other thing, back to the question, which mode of teaching takes more preparation and effort? In my experience and the experience of others has proven that planning and preparing for online lessons take more time and effort than the normal face-to-face teaching for a range of reasons. One, it's not our traditional way of teaching. It's not the day in, day out business we do every day. It's a new method which requires learning from our side as educators, and also requires a lot of caution and preparation and testing and trying and research and filtering and trying to find out what works best, because we're not teaching in our normal situation. That's one thing. The other thing is in the face-to-face class, everybody has got access to the same facilities. It's you, the board, the course book, the overhead projector, the board marker. Everybody is in the same room, have access to the same thing. Moving to the remote teaching can create divides, can leave people behind. That's why you have an extra effort to do here. Besides your normal work of designing and preparing the content as a teacher, you're preparing some content for learners to learn. You need also to cover the gaps and make sure that nobody is harmed by the remote delivery or the remote teaching. That requires more research, that requires more thinking, taking more considerations into your account, a lot of that. So yes, remote teaching requires more time and effort. That's why we're talking about the final top tips in this slide. And one of the top tips in this particular slide is to chunk your lessons into small items. Do not go big. Do not plan for so many things. Keep it simple, keep it short so that you can handle it, because we agreed it will take more time than normal. So consider the devices available first before you decide on the mode of delivery. Do not develop content for all the curriculum at once. Chunk, break it down to small parts. Take one part at a time, develop it, design it, deliver it online or remotely and refine as you go. You keep learning as you go. You keep changing and improving your content as you go. Diversify your content. It's not always PowerPoint presentations, it's not always videos, not always audios, it's a combination of all of them. Be open to gain new skills. For example, the screencastify. I didn't know how to do screencasting before COVID, and when people talked about screencasting, I wouldn't understand what that is actually. But I learned how to do screencasting, and one of the very popular instructional videos published on the Teaching English website, like one of the top viewed videos, is produced by me. I did it myself in my bedroom. I used my laptop, I used my microphone, I wrote a script, I designed the slides, and I used the Screencastify from Google, and I did it. And you can find it there. It's very professional. Again, we cannot stress enough the importance of the online safety, especially for the children. Review your online content, please, from the first till the last minute. Don't get deceived by the title or the first part of the video or the article. Review it all of it. Don't forget to make space for collaboration. They are not brought online to be isolated. They are brought online to work together. And the two collaborative tools today, Flipgrid and Padlet, I'm sure you've heard of them. Again, put them on your list, try them out next week or the week after, and see if you can use them. The top tools that I've used for 8 months, and I really recommend them, is Flipgrid, Padlet, Quizlet, Seesaw, Wakelet. We talked about that, Google Forms, and the book widget. Again, this goes back to the question we had today. It could be overwhelming. Preparing for online lessons could take longer time, more effort. Again, focus on the essential content. Make your decision on what is really essential and absolutely needed to teach the students, and to focus on the learning outcomes. Chunk your videos or your audios into small segments so that you can transfer them or send them to your students without putting them under financial pressure of buying expensive data packages. Today, we've covered the key frameworks, one by the British Council, the CPD framework, check it out online on the Teaching English website, and one by Cambridge English, which is specifically for digital delivery. We've looked at some samples of criteria of selecting and evaluating online materials. We talked about the top tips on how to create or digitize existing content for remote teaching. And it's time now to share with you some useful resources. There is a fantastic webinar the Teaching English website did at the beginning of the pandemic. It's how to use your course book online and some ideas for using the breakout rooms. There is also our Facebook Live. You've seen a screenshot of it on how to create your own content. It's 30 minutes, but it's full of very good advice and very interesting tips on that. There is also a good remote teaching tip comes in the form of a PDF file on how to use your course book online. And check out another interesting remote teaching tip, comes in the format of PDF file on inclusion in remote delivery. And finally, and I'm sure not everybody knows that this thing exists, it's the professional practice pathway tips. It comes in the format of PDF files, and it covers the 12 professional practices we've discussed at the beginning of today's webinar. And to go back to this particular one around managing resources, you have 2 pages of fantastic resources on how to develop and adapt content for remote teaching. That's all from me.
Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to close the presentation. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.